Hello, and welcome to this edition of School Health Presents Working with Our Exceptional Individuals During the COVID-19 Pandemic. I've had a lot of groups reach out to me and say, okay, we've got all these conflicting things. We just need some basic ideas for what could be going on at home, especially when it comes to things like math and spelling or communicating. So this video is going to focus on just some simple things you can be doing with, again, things you've got around the house. I want to start with math first. Oftentimes math is something that we from a different generation picture as a bunch of numbers and things that you would see either up on a chalkboard that would translate to an interactive whiteboard for some of you of a younger generation, and then on pieces of paper, something like this that we would complete for homework. The reality is manipulatives oftentimes give a stronger sense of what a number actually represents. So when we're looking at manipulatives, sometimes you've got things lying around the house. These are just some simple traceable numbers that I've got. You might have magnets that go up on the refrigerator. You might have some other things, even wood blocks that actually have numbers on them. That's always a great thing to have because, again, you've got the tactile side along with the visual side coming into play. At this time of the year, another thing we tend to see, there's all types of candy out there, whether they be jelly beans or chocolates or some other things out there. Use those to your advantage. So I've just got a handful of candy right now that I'm going to bring up, just some Starbursts here. I've got both packets of Starbursts that are red on the outside and pink on the outside. We're going to come back to that whole idea of colors in just a moment though. But when we're talking counting, we can actually now take something like these two numbers, 2 and 3, and actually start putting together. We've got 2 pinks and we've got 3 reds. How many is that all together? And then have our individuals go through and count things all together. Or we have 3 reds and we take away 2. How many do we have left? So again, the idea of having some basic things actually works well. Jelly beans work great for this too, especially since we see them so much at this time of the year. Another thing to be aware of, it's not just simple addition and subtraction. We can get into multiplication and division too as we go through. Division is actually the easiest to get across when you're dealing with candy like this, and this can even go into candy bars or chips or other things of that nature. Why I bring that up is each one of these packets actually has 2 little Starbursts in it. Well, now we can talk about dividing by 2. We have 2, we divide it. What do we have? 50% of it, and now we're talking percentages too, is 1. So 1 plus 1 equals 2, and that's a packet. And so what we can start doing is really taking these things that are conceptual in nature and start to make them a little more concrete for our individuals as they go through. So again, take things that you've got. Some of you may be using things like apple chips or banana chips. Fine, continue to use those too. But the idea is that we should be able to take numbers in addition and subtraction and multiplication and division and build them into whatever. So those are some things that, again, for our exceptional individuals, you may want to be trying on the numbers side. Add in that tactile side, but also make it understandable with what we're doing. Adjust. Again, as you saw, we could actually do things like percentages. We can do things at this time of the year too, since we're all at home doing a lot of baking. What happens when you're measuring out 1/3 of a cup of flour? How is 1/3? Yeah, you just pull out the cup. Sometimes it says 1/3 on it, but you can be sharing that and then talking about how 1/3, if we had 2 more, so 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 equals 1 cup. And that will start to help individuals as they go through. A great way to do this is to actually just be using water and have a cup of water or a half a cup of water and have it next to, if you have a larger measuring container, and just start pouring in a half cup or a quarter cup at a time and working with our individuals to get them to understand that 2 halves equal a full cup. 2 halves equal a whole. and start bringing to light some of the things at home that in the past they've only been doing perhaps at school. What we're doing from a pragmatic side too is we're working with them on being able to put together things in the kitchen. So that would include teaspoons and tablespoons, and don't ask me to describe those. All I know is I follow directions, and if there's a B in there, that means tablespoon, as opposed to just the TSB, that means the teaspoon. But the reality is this: we can be working with our individuals, again, giving them the idea that numbers mean something every single day. They're not just restricted to a class somewhere. That goes the same for letters. I've got some sensory stones right here. You can't see this necessarily from this distance, but this is E, A, T. So we can begin putting words together like eat as they're going through. Again, you don't necessarily need a sensory stone or some of the tracing letters like I've got here. Anything is going to work. Make letters yourself, just out of paper. One of the things at home that you can be doing over the course of time, if you've got refrigerator magnets, use those. If you've got things that actually, we see some things that are actually made from sponge that can go into the bathtub too. Use those. Have letters as part of everything that you're doing through the context of the day. Why is that important as we go through? Well, again, what we're trying to do is get this idea that letters are essential to communication, are essential to words. They are that building block that we can go through. And the recognition of those letters and the recognition of words oftentimes empowers an individual as they move on. So just some very simple activities where you can move letters, move stones with letters painted on around. Another reason why I have the sponge out is sometimes these are fun to use, not necessarily cutting them into shape, but putting different letters on, but not like we normally would. Put letters on something like this in dish soap. So whether you're using Dawn or Palmolive or what you're using, put a letter on there and have them trace that letter if they don't have sensory issues which would prohibit them from that. But now think about that. So you are spelling things out, and maybe you put a couple of letters on there and they get a word. And make sure you've got the sponge damp first, but after they've done that and they've spelled that word, have them wash a dish. So maybe D-I-S-H, dish, and then have them wash the dish as they go through. But in that process, be guiding them. One of the things you might want to understand for those of you parents at home who are still trying to figure out, how do I do everything the teachers are suggesting? When you have an individual who is having some issues understanding what tracing means or what movement means, we oftentimes use what's called hand over hand, where you just have their hand over and you're simply helping them trace a letter as they go through. But now what you're doing again is twofold. You are teaching them what that spelling is, but you're also teaching them about washing dishes. Oh, and by the way, you're also making sure that you're desensitizing them to the use of something like a sponge in water as you're doing dishes. And so you're really creating some healthy habits too as we go along. What happens if we're just dealing with paper and pen? Make sure that if that individual can write, that you're giving them the tools to be able to write as best they can. I've got a thicker pen here. If you're trying to make something even thicker because you don't have a pencil grip or a pen grip that they're using or able to use, and you need to have something that makes this a little bit bigger, simply duct tape or some other types of cloth tape wrapped around the bottom will actually allow them to grasp somewhat better. One fun thing that you can do at home, and we actually began using this back in the late 90s when interactive whiteboards first came into vogue, but this made it very easy. We would actually just, and I am going to right now, just print something on this sheet. We would simply have something printed out in advance. And then what we have the individuals do on that interactive whiteboard, which realistically you can have them do with a crayon or a highlighter, which you might already have at home, Now what they can do is they can trace over. So I'm just going to trace over. And again, don't assume that all of our individuals will be able to do this without some help, without some guidance. But it's a great activity. And what you want to be remembering is have positive affirmations, have positive thoughts that you're doing as you're doing some of these practicing. Because another thing you're doing by practicing is you are practicing physiological movements as you go through. You're practicing fine motor skills. You are also practicing eye-hand coordination as we go through. As you talk with SLPs, OTs, many of the therapists who are out there, what they're encouraging our individuals at home to be doing are life skills based. Everything we need to be doing right now is life skills based. So take that and keep that in mind as you're going through. So letters, numbers, still an important thing, but use what you've got around the house. Just use it in a different way and make the applications for it so pragmatic. Remember back in the old days when we said, why do we need to know math? We were going to do X, Y, or Z. Well, we need to know math so that we bake things the right way. We need to know math so that we're able to divide things the right way when we're sharing a meal with someone. Why do we need to know letters or words? Because it gives us a sense of control, especially in a world today where control is something we really don't feel we have a lot of. Thank you for all that you're doing, and know that we're all in this together.